Hello everyone and welcome to Beyond Binary Thinking, a podcast where we try to inform ourselves whilst remaining open to challenges and corrections as we meet differing opinions in various states of sobriety.
Welcome to Beyond Binary's drug episode where everyone is organised. From Stockholm, I'm Toby.
From Amsterdam, I'm Stephanie.
From Hong Kong, I'm Jimmy.
So, sensitive subject then, this time, because I really wanted to approach this subject for a while now with the group. The subject of drugs, and then maybe in specifically psychedelic. But before we get to that, the terminology around drugs can be so loaded, I feel. And I realized that the other day I was hearing someone on the TV show call someone else a narc. And I realized like how American that language is. Narc being for the narcotics control agencies, which is not really something that we have here in Europe. The terminology has come over from the States maybe a little bit, but it's not something that's very native in European culture. And even the way you use the terminology of drugs and medication, I think is different in the US than in Europe, right? We always talk about medication when it's hospital and drugs when it's deviant. Whereas in the States, their pharmaceutical drugs are still drugs, whereas at least in the Netherlands, we call that medication. We never refer to it as drugs.
In the UK, we use both, but in Spain, for example, they have two different words.
Both as well.
To distinguish.
Right. So drugs here always has like a very negative connotation. But of course, the line between what is a drug and what is a medication is always historically been blurred, right? So when we had the tribal way of living, especially we still see it in the Amazon, there are a lot of rituals involving psychedelic drugs. Tobacco used to be a plant used in shamanistic rituals. Cocaine was still used in America for medication until fairly recently. And heroin we still use in hospitals in the form of different painkillers. So the line, of course, is blurred, right?
Well, the line seems pretty clear. If it's a white-owned corporation, then it's fine.
Can money be made off it?
By rich white corporations.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the explosion of the cannabis industry in America now. It's these young, hip white guys making an absolute fortune, whilst tens of thousands of young black men are incarcerated for the exact same thing.
Yeah, the guys that weren't quite smart enough to work in tech.
Right. Well, the argument, of course, in the US to legalize it was that this brings in taxes, right? Money. Was never a healthcare or criminal so much as a financial decision.
Like, obviously that was going to be the argument that was going to win in the end.
Right. That was the argument I was hearing at like Rotterdam Sunsplash Festival years ago when they were putting forward the case for like working out exactly how much money could be made in tax, but also how much money would be saved in the criminal justice system, not only in policing and in the courts, but also in terms of prison cost, right? So like it would save the UK about £1 billion. But still, we haven't seen that happen.
Let's rewind, right? It's 2020, and we still are living with prohibition. And I don't know many countries where the majority of people don't think it's entirely ridiculous. And even in these countries where they finally legalized it and are starting to tax it, there are still mostly black people in prisons for doing a thing that's now legal. And big corporation money. My co-founder, who's quite straight-laced, was talking to me about how ridiculous prohibition was and how it didn't work. And I was like, yeah, it's a shame we still have it. And he was like, well, I don't... So like, start explaining to him drug policy. And the funny thing is, you delve into it, like year after year, the police themselves in most of these countries put a request in. They say, hey, could we stop wasting police time with this bullshit? Because it's a political football that we don't see as a valid use of police time. And yeah, it just dawned on him like he hadn't, I think in our circles we just accept this argument, right? Anyone that does recreational drugs, yeah, you're preaching to the choir any time you talk about the end of prohibition. But I could just see he'd never had this laid out to him, that we're still existing in ridiculous age of prohibition for some reason.
And very few people will make that argument about alcohol, right? That it should be prohibited. That we should go back to prohibition because clearly it didn't work, even if you're against alcohol.
Right, we tried. Yeah, we tried. The resistance of the public was too large. But, the counter-argument is that the resistance of the public is not that large when it comes to other drugs, right? Like, en masse, the public has accepted that maybe stuff like cocaine, ecstasy, LSD, it seems that the larger public does not want these things to be legalized yet. And for cannabis, I think it's in a category of its own, more leaning towards the alcohol, where you can have a more larger civil acceptance of it. There's a reason why we have prohibition, because we've talked about in previous episode, it went wrong with opium in China, and we've had too many people become opium addicts. So we people wanted to control
the
it.
Oxycontin addiction now, which is like devastating, rural America. Oh my God, I saw Dave Chappelle stand up recently live, and one of the best things not that recently, because obviously that doesn't exist anymore, but yeah, one of the best things he said was like watching all these rural white people in America get addicted to drugs. He knows exactly how white people felt in the 80s when it was happening to black people in the ghettos. Like, I couldn't care less. Fuck them all.
Well, I guess nothing's changed or nothing got better by putting it in control of the government. Clearly, the only thing what we did is basically we created a giant wave of crime, because most organized crime is dependent on drug money and drug trade. And we still have opium addicts, even though we've made it pharmaceutical rather than criminal. So this would be an argument for total let go of control. But I specifically, personally, would like to see psychedelics to be let go again. I think until the 50s, 60s, it was completely rare thing, right? No one had ever heard about it. There were some scholars that were studying peyote cults in Mexico and tribal cults in the Amazon, but no one was really concerned about it. Then you had the 60s and the hippies, and then became a problem, right? And it became such a problem that we didn't even medically research it until about 10 years ago. It started to come back again. And I think we're seeing a sort of a second renaissance, a second wave of psychedelic research.
Because originally there was a lot of research done in like the 60s and 70s, even with things like DMT, right? Like from, was it Rick Strauss or Straussman who was doing the DMT research? And it was all clinically prepared trials, everything like you would do any other drug or new compound or whatever. And then it was just suddenly, boom, they just changed the schedule of a lot of these drugs overnight, and the research was just abandoned until 10 years ago.
I mean, abandoned or taken over by the CIA, if the whole MK Ultra is to be believed.
Well, no, they did do stuff, but that was at the time when they were still,
To give it some context,
I believe that.
To introduce, thankfully, I pronounce Mergin's name so inconsistently that he's anonymous anyway.
To give it Dutch guy we get out every week.
To give it some context,
Mr. Gin, yes,
Mr. Gin, yeah. When I first met him at the University of Cambridge, we
all went there.
Where we all went to.
Went back to his place. And I was really quite anti-drugs. I'd got on kind of this hippie thing where I was like, look, if it's organic and it's natural, if it's grown from the earth, it's probably fine. Anything else, I won't touch.
Spot the fallacy.
Well, it's a fair enough rule. If you're going to live in ignorance, you have to have some code that gets you through the day anyway, right?
Yeah, but at least have some rule. How silly it is.
Yeah, so that was mine. I'd made it up. It was my heuristic. It done me well so far, right?
I don't think it's that's too uncommon either amongst especially young drug users. I think a lot of people had that mentality.
Well, it's fair enough. I don't trust someone that's made it in a lab for profit. It didn't seem to be a bad rule for me to follow. Right.
I've had those sentiments echoed many times, like from many different.
Anyway,
groups,
let me take this point home. This is the man that had literally a PowerPoint presentation on why laughing gas was a great drug, and we were going to have a great time. There were no side effects. It was entirely safe. I went through it all, and I was there like,
wow.
You had this prepared. I was like, okay. I'm convinced I'm going to join you on this trip. And so we did nitrous together. It was fun. It didn't noticeably kill any of my brain cells, and I'm still alive.
Yeah, but there can be side effects from that.
They were not featured in your PowerPoint.
It's not completely safe. Just make sure you're B12 not B12 deficient, right? Take your B12 supplements. Anyone, vegan or not vegan. Nitrous or no nitrous.
Legally speaking, any experiences which I may convey may not necessarily be my own experiences. However, me and a friend at university, both of us will remain nameless.
University of Cambridge.
At Cambridge, yes. We had that brilliant money-making idea of becoming drug dealers, allegedly. And so we had two avenues. Obviously, there was marijuana and there was NOS. So the first avenue of selling NOS canisters at parties was a financial failure because we kept on just giving them away. You go to a party and you think that, okay, well, we only need to sell like half of them and we'll make a profit, right? And then you've ended up like you sell 1 in 10 basically, and everyone's like, hey, do you want a balloon? Do you want a balloon? Do you want a balloon? Yeah. And then so, okay, well, fair enough. So marijuana, obviously. Marijuana is a politicized term invented by Americans to stigmatize Latinos. They might as well use called cannabis. Anyway, so we tried selling pot, allegedly. And again, huge problem because we kept on smoking it, allegedly. And again, just we bought this large pillowcase of weed, and it was great. We lost several hundreds of pounds on these schemes.
Up in smoke.
You had a great time, though. You learned a valuable business lesson.
Yeah. I am not a businessman.
So, while desperately looking to hire, outbound sales phone monkey is the technical term, right? That business development guy gets on the phone and cold calls a bunch of people. I was struggling to hire someone for the rates that my company were offering, but I desperately needed someone on my growing team. So I found a friend. We'll call him Duke. Do you guys remember Duke? He was younger. Yes, he did.
I remember Duke. Yeah.
Okay. So I hired this guy, and he was like, "Oh, what have you been up to?" And he's like, a bit of this, bit of that, which turned out to mean mostly dealing drugs. And so it was amazing insight into how that world works, because he was predominantly selling coke and ecstasy. And the funny thing is, like, as with all businesses, small entrepreneurs, what really kills you is the hidden costs. And being the nerd that I was, I actually got out a spreadsheet for him and showed him where he was losing money. And it was the classic thing of any bank error was always in the person above him's favour. So if he got high on too much of his own supply, or if someone stole something, or if the police captured something, that loss would never go upstream. It was always, he was sold it on tick, right, and was expected to give back. And any loss that happened, he was the one taking all of the risk for a minority of the profit. And I was like, yeah, that's just a bad deal, right? Like, I can just explain this to you in business terms.
It's like a bit like a multi-level marketing.
Yeah. The aggressive gypsy guy above you, who's 3 times your age and has a bunch of people your age also with knives high on their supply as well, willing to collect that debt when the time comes. That's the problem with this whole pyramid scheme. That's why you're fucked, man.
So really what we should be doing is moving this entire industry away from the hands of criminals, it would appear.
I mean, we're doing the opposite. It's literally a gift to organised crime. And then this is the problem with the arguments for prohibition. You're like, oh, but gangs are bad. You're like, yeah, we're agreeing.
So maybe cut off a revenue source.
Yeah, so I get from this, Chris, your fear as well for anything that's chemically produced, right? I think in a lot of countries it's fairly safe to have this fear for things you buy in the black market that are chemically produced. I come from the Netherlands. It's a little bit different situation here since the market quality is generally a bit higher. But yeah, marijuana you can grow in your own backyard. Mushrooms you can grow yourself. San Pedro cacti you could even grow yourself if you live, especially if you live in Spain with a bit of good sun.
I mean, the big thing here is capitalism, right? The profit margin. If you're doing it with someone and they're also joining you on the thing, and you know that there's no way they're making any money off this, the profit margin's like that. I trust that person more, right?
No, but I'm not just talking. I think the argument you make between natural and chemical, I think it's an interesting argument. I hear this quite often. I don't buy that it's always just a profit-motivated business. Especially the people that designed these chemicals often came at it from a very different angle. Take LSD, for example. This was really produced in a hunt for finding a medication and then accidentally discovered. And we're talking about a substance, I think this is interesting as well. We're talking about a substance that you can if in the crystallized form you can fit it on the pin of a needle, and we've never discovered this before. You can fit it on the pin of a needle, and if you take it, it profoundly alters your existence. We've never discovered something like LSD that is so, in such minute quantities, so psychoactive. And this is an experience.
Point of clarification. Does it alter your perception of your existence or your actual existence?
I'll leave that up to the interpreter. I don't think it matters. I think the only thing that matters is that it is one of the most unique discoveries we've made in terms of what a molecule can do to the human reality, the perception of reality.
And yeah, we could sort of swing towards the sort of philosophical route, and I mean, reality is technically limited by what our perception of what reality even is, and so on and so forth. I personally, I don't like hallucinogenics at all, and if I was to have tried them a couple of times, I had terrible experiences. Pretty much every single time I've found myself hallucinating, because my mental state is not. I don't think it's geared towards that. So, like, for example, as you're saying, Mr. Jin, that I was fairly convinced that my reality was altered, and it caused me almost like long-standing psychological damage because of the realizations that I was perceiving that I was having under the influence of these drugs. And that scares the hell out of me. I don't like any of that. I'd rather not. I understand that some people are absolutely fine with hallucinogenics, but it's not good for my psyche.
Were you told beforehand what you were getting into?
Oh, yeah.
Because I mean, if you were told beforehand, and afterwards you found out, I mean, I think that the danger, there should be a good warning label on it, and I think it should be not therapeuticized in a way that is sort of legal. You need a license to do it, but therapeuticized in that you have a guide who takes you with in a specific group setting that is geared completely to maximizing this experience.
I was stitched up both times. I allegedly tried LSD.
Had you taken other things at the same time? Like
I mean,
probably weed,
like, maybe, but
because that probably is quite a big
so first time I found myself in a field with what would have been quite a good group of people to be experimenting first time with drugs or like with LSD. But the problem is that we were also joined by an individual who I hadn't seen for several years, and he spent a long time discussing things like the shadow universe, where everything is like happening that's not really happening as well. Not great conversation for me to be having at that specific time.
Very susceptible, yeah.
I've literally got annoyed, even if someone's like really high or really drunk, and I've seen someone like fucking with them, it's always really bothered me. Why you need a shaman, if you will. I know people like wince at that term, but yeah, someone that's going to look after you, a babysitter in effect.
Yeah, but I'm sure he probably, like, this individual probably had the best intentions. Maybe he wanted to be fucking with me. I don't know. However, they were the only one who wasn't on LSD at that time. And they sort of, as I say, it's an old friend I haven't seen for years. Thought he was dead, actually, which is it was very bizarre that he decided to just like walk in through the front door the day I'm tripping balls on acid.
You sure he was there?
Well, yeah.
Still quite chaos, right? We just it's no preparation. We just do it in random moments with random people. And that's our tradition, which I don't think is the best. I think it should be democratized, right? Like, so, for example, you have the Santo Daime Church. They do ayahuasca ceremonies, but they're very religious. They're very Christian religious. So don't make it all about Jesus and God, right? So, sure, you can do ayahuasca. Just be aware that they're going to talk about Jesus and God a lot, and that's going to influence your trip and how you're going to perceive your trip. And you don't even need to be religious. I've known people that are not religious, went there, still had a good time, didn't take the God pill, but they had their own experience, right? And I think they're here in Amsterdam, they're a little bit more liberal and not so strict. But if you do it in a tribe, you'll get stories about ancestors, and they'll explain how everything you experience is the ancestors talking to you. So everyone will have a different story for what happened to you. Maybe shadow conspiracy, maybe, the ancestors.
There's this trope of elves there's a bunch of people who say you
Right.
always see elves, right? So
On
that's what they
DMT,
expect to see.
but I think it should, choose your own group that you want sort of your own story from. Choose your own guide, your own mediator. I don't think it should be controlled, but I think it should be upground and not underground. I think it should
Near
be
nature,
in the light.
ideally,
I
right?
think
People
it should be
Absolutely,
do it
visible.
in an old dingy flat.
I mean, just not criminalized, right? So there's checks and balances. We can see who are these shamans, what are they selling, what are the reviews from people that have done it. Have people come from there, had a really terrible experience, and went fucking crazy?
So you talk about the 60s and people glorify it, but if you look, there are a lot of weird personality cults, right? Pseudo religions popping up, and if we're being real, looking into it, things not to bring up while on hard drugs, but a lot of sexual abuse, right? A lot of these cult figures who are like, right, everyone needs to sleep with each other and me.
Are you saying that the Manson family had problematic aspects?
My favourite aspect, by the way, of our podcast with Mantles that we did a couple of nights ago, the guy was like, I'm a free speech absolutist. Even Charles Manson, he never killed anyone. I was like, what? I think you've just argued yourself into a hole, dude. Come on.
It just inception people during LSD trips, right? Is that killing people? It's an argument you can make.
There is a great book out on just that, and I can't remember the. I have it written down somewhere about. Oh yes, Chaos by Tom O'Neill, who actually ties in the whole Manson thing to MK Ultra and how Manson appeared to have a handler within the police force. Because of the amount of times he was arrested and then just let out on the streets immediately afterwards, and his various connections with people who were associated with the MK Ultra project. So Chaos argues that basically the entire Tate killings was a psyop to discredit the hippie movement. It's vaguely conspiratorial thing, but the guy's spent 3 decades researching this book, writing it, and he's
the
not.
problem is he's been interviewing people adjacent to the Manson clan, so I can only imagine the lines you draw between all of their data points. He might be right, but how the fuck could we ever know?
No, but I would recommend the book Chaos by Tom O'Neill.
It sounds like it's gonna send me more mad than a bad acid trip.
It just might make you distrust the government a bit.
No, I think in the MK Ultra bit, it makes sense. I think governments use psychoactive substances still. Maybe not LSD anymore. They've probably developed it much further now. Yeah, of course, make people susceptible and twist their brains a bit, right? You can twist that to your advantage. I don't think it's far-fetched to think that they do try these avenues.
I prefer the conspiracy theory that goes the other way, that says the government doesn't want us to open our minds with these drugs, which is why they're illegal. These drugs are the key, and the government's trying to keep us locked in the prison.
Yeah, maybe that's something to go into, because one thing that I wanted to mention was, do you guys remember Professor Nutt?
Oh yeah, David Nutt. Is it David Nutt? Yeah.
David Nutt, yeah. He was a professor hired by the government in 2008. I believe he started doing some government-funded research, the UK government, under Tony Labour, I think it was. Tony Blair.
Yeah, Tony Labour.
Anyway, he'd done... Tony Labour. Anyway, he'd done this research, and he came out with it, and I've got it open here.
D's Nuts?
It's fascinating.
Yeah, D Nuts.
Professor D Nuts. Okay.
Yeah. He drew up the proposals for the government's drug policy, and it was basically just toleration, lifting prohibition, all these sorts of things.
Before we get to that, I'll tell you what the results were of the study, because they looked at harm. So harm to the user and harm to others of all drugs. So alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, hallucinogenics, amphetamines, everything basically. And it turned out that alcohol was by far and away the most dangerous drug to...
Yeah, I don't like this line.
That does not make sense.
I'm trying to help you get your... I'm trying to help you get your drugs legalized.
I'm telling you the results of his research, which you can look up.
No one said so far that we should prohibit... Yeah, no one has argued that.
I'm not saying I'm against... How dare you take away my...
Well, we haven't even suggested it yet. Nice one.
Then in the middle, like, pretty dangerous. Heroin and crack cocaine, yeah, nothing controversial there, really. And then you've got, like, tobacco, cocaine, methamphetamine, right? And then you've got, like, cannabis, and then followed by that, then you've got the others, like anabolic steroids, ecstasy, LSD, mushrooms, right? Basically sort of tailoring off. And his then recommendation to the government was like, hey, you know how, like, some things are class A and B and C and D and some things are totally legal? That doesn't match the data at all. So what I recommend is you should maybe, like, rethink it, because MDMA is about as dangerous as riding a horse, to put it, like, to give you some
his
comparisons.
quote is, like, you've asked me to research this. Horse riding is more dangerous than most of the drugs on this list. Only dangerous side effects of doing most of these drugs is the criminal sentence that you guys have put on it. That damages lives more than any of these drugs ever will. And I can't... Did he get fired or quit in outrage?
No,
died.
basically what happened is they just... No,
The conspiracy theory. These nuts still live.
They're still around now. These nuts are alive.
There's
and
someone
kicking.
else
they
in which
just
case
went,
associated with this was found dead. Anyway,
Someone
might
did
not have
die.
been him.
Let Finn finish his point.
Yeah, sorry.
No, they published, like, the peer-reviewed study is there to view for everyone. They basically went, yeah, we're not going to fund you anymore, you're sacked. And we're not going to listen to anything that you
Right, so he
recommended."
quit.
And that was basically the end of it. And everyone was like, what? What? And then, yeah, they just fired him, basically, and went, nah, shut up.
I studied with a professor that was advisor to the United Nations Narcotics Control Board. And basically what he told me after I did his semester was that we know all the facts. We know it. It's just a matter of, is there political will to look at the facts and make policy based on the facts? And then you come into the territory, like Chris said, is it all conspiracy theory against the mind and the freedom of the mind? So I can look in my own country. We used to have mushrooms, normal mushrooms, that were legal. Now not anymore. When did they do it? They did it under a government of Christian conservatives.
And it's easy enough to do, right? Because you just throw out a few scare stories about the foreigners who jumped
Right.
out of a window of a
Exactly,
hospital.
which turned out to be false. So there's a taboo on these kind of substances, and certainly the Christians don't want you experimenting with it and see anything. Apparently, they don't want you to see God, because it's very much possible to see God on these substances. There used to be a taboo against therapy as well. And now if you have a problem, people are like, go to a therapist, talk about your shit, do some mindfulness. There's no taboo on that anymore. But we still have a taboo on, go and take a mushroom trip.
Why does the taboo exist? Do you think it's to protect certain belief systems, certain worldviews?
Well, certainly certain cultural worldviews. We look at people taking mushrooms as being ravey, hippie.
Yeah, but if you want to break down your worldview, I mean, like, taking hallucinogenics is quite a good way to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, they don't want people coming to the realization that we're all aspects of God manifested and experience itself simultaneously through some sort of weird cosmic...
Sorry, who thinks we actually have a democratic vote here? A bunch of boomers who've grew up on and learnt to believe their own propaganda are the most people that vote. This isn't just an English thing.
Well, the thing is that me and Mr. Jin, we actually live in countries with representative democracies where we can vote for people who would, if they have enough votes, they'll
Yes,
gain
they'll
power.
make policy.
I mean,
but you
Yeah,
have the largest
happens.
and worst generation squatting above you, holding all resources and voting the most readily. And that's the case for most of
Right.
the world. And they were raised on propaganda that was very much hippies, Woodstock, all fine and good,
Yeah.
but
War on drugs.
came.
Yeah.
It was it Nixon's advisor said outright, but you're not allowed to arrest people for protesting the Vietnam War and being black. So drugs were the most obvious excuse, right? Because someone at those protests would have drugs. That's why we instated.
Why don't we have a referendum? If we can have a referendum on Brexit.
For the same reason, because most of the people voting would be old people that read the propaganda. Drugs are bad. Okay.
I don't even think you get 50% in the Netherlands. And we have like a festival culture where everyone does ecstasy.
Yeah, but then they don't go and vote because they've got a hangover.
Yeah, but here we've made the solution, right? So here it's not legal, but we just let it happen. We just don't talk about it. Yeah, we sell it, we buy it, but we don't prosecute it. It just happens,
Everyone just does what they want and just don't mention it. It's fine.
This is the Dutch system.
I mean, look, this is white privilege, but I have walked past a policeman smoking a spliff, and he's given me a smirk.
Especially at Notting Hill. I mean, no one cares. But the point is, this money's still going to the criminals and to the human traffickers. And,
sounds like
anarchy. It's not really the solution.
Yes.
Let's be honest. Because when you look at the evidence, well, you see where the money's going, where it could
especially
be
with
going.
cocaine,
It's
right?
just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Where it could be spent on education and rehabilitation to actually help people who have suffered from the bad effects that occasionally come up with these substances, And instead, it's being sold to makes sex traffickers and child traffickers richer.
No, it's that thing you mentioned about whole white privilege. In the UK, there was no real stigma when it came to cannabis, I found, and you could be quite open about smoking. I've smoked with police officers allegedly in a pub I was running. My worldview was kind of shattered when I moved to Sweden. I'd quit smoking drugs by that point, but occasional dabble. But I was stopped by a plainclothes policeman going through the subway. And he just walked up and like, "Hi, excuse me, how are you doing? You look a bit tired. What have you been doing today?" I'm like, "Well, I've finished work. I'm gonna go see my girlfriend." He's like, "Oh yeah, you've been drinking, been smoking?" I'm like, "I had like 18 cups of tea." He's like, "Okay, interesting. Do you smoke a lot of weed?" "Who the fuck are you?" It's like, "Oh yes, I'm with the police. Would you mind coming with me?" "Okay, sure, fine, whatever." And
that's where you went wrong, mate. You go, "Am I being detained? Am I free to go?" And he's like, "Yeah, you are." You're like, "All right."
A good citizen never complies.
I thought that I'd done nothing wrong. And as I said, I am a white man, like sort of 26, 27 years old. I've never had any issues with the police, the constabulary. I mean, they're going after criminals, not pot smokers.
And you've never had your prostate touched, and this is a free opportunity. On the
we're going to check up at the same time.
Full cavity search.
So he goes through my phone. And he's like, "Can I borrow your phone?" Like, "Yeah, sure."
Oh my God! What the fuck? How is this legal?
What the hell?
Welcome to Sweden. Because I told him, like, "Look, I haven't smoked weed for..." We're Swedish and I'm polite. Anyway, and he starts going... I think he's going to go through my messages, like see if my drug dealer's like, "Hi, would you like to buy all the cocaine?" And I'll be like, "Yes, sell me the cocaine," or whatever. But he goes through like pictures, and I'm like, "Oh, don't do that. Like, that's a picture of my girlfriend in there. Don't do that." And he's like, he finds a stock photo of a pistol. I don't know why I have it. I think it's like came with some sort of album art. And he's like, "Is this yours?" And I'm like,
"Is this my phone?"
That's like 36 by 36 pixel resolution of obviously a stock photo of a No, I don't own a pistol. It's like, okay, fine. And he finds like pictures of when I was in Amsterdam and my friend and like a small mountain of cocaine. And he's like, "What's this?" I'm like, "Oh, that's my friend. I don't know him. I don't know what that is."
"It's my friend. I don't know him." That's amazing.
Yeah. And he's like, "Okay, well, what is this?" And I'm like, I don't know. I went to Amsterdam. And I'm like, "Well, maybe we did drugs in Amsterdam, but it's not illegal to have done drugs." He's like, "Yes, it is."
No.
I'm like, "What?" "It's illegal to have done drugs." I'm like,
"What are you talking
"There's
about?"
no drugs in my system." He's like, "Doesn't matter. If you did drugs, you've broken the law." I'm like...
I'm not even judging the cop at this point. You're criminally stupid in this interaction. Oh my
Right?
God.
Very, very inexperienced when it comes to dealing with the police. So, and he's like, "Okay, well, you have to take a year." Now, it doesn't help that I'm traveling with my brother, who immediately explains that in his sock there's like 5 grams of cannabis, and at home there's like another 20 grams. Because again,
I just
we
have
are
this
not...
beautiful vision of Sweden as this. Do you know Demolition Man?
No
where they
one
go in
can
the
lie.
future, and everyone's so naive. And this cop from the past is like, "Oh my God." And that's what Sweden is.
Yeah.
The cops are just like, "Have you done drugs?" And the guy's like confessing, showing photos on his phone. "This is me from 4 years ago. I did the drugs once." And his brother's
man.
like, "Oh, I have the drugs on me now, officer. You should arrest me."
Right.
The Swedish cop's like, "Well, I've hit my quota for the year." Done. Case closed.
But so I get to take a urine test at the subway station, with him just like standing next to me. I'm like, yep, this is all fine. This doesn't feel at all as if I have any civil rights being violated or anything. No, but it turns out that actually the police was very much in their right to do all of these things because it's very much illegal to be doing drugs, apparently. Anyway.
to have done drugs, according to this policeman.
Ever.
Yeah.
Doing is different to have done.
Now, of course, obviously, nothing was tested, which means I didn't have to pay for the urine test, which is good, because that's a couple of hundred quid. If you lie to the police and you say that, no, I haven't done any drugs, and then you test positive, yeah, you have to pay for it. Or if you test positive, having told them that you've done drugs, you pay for it. Like my brother, who said, yeah, no, I'm really stoned. I got weed on me. I got weed at home. I am really stoned right now, officer. He's like, okay, good. Can you come with me for a urine test? And it's like, I just told you I'm stoned. It's like, okay, fine. So they charge him for the urine test and then give him like £1,000 fine for smoking
stoned.
Cannabis. Welcome to Sweden. It's
Well, that's fantastic.
obviously it's a long anecdote, but as did like the cherry on top, I met that same police officer a month later, and he recognized me, but we were in a pub, and he was so drunk he couldn't speak, he couldn't stand, but he knew he recognized me from somewhere, probably because he spent like 5 minutes staring at my dick, which is impressionable.
My God.
And
My God.
yeah, he tried to have a conversation with him, like kind of, you're familiar, and I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. Nice to see you so drunk you can't stand, just holding up those moral fucking.
What you should have done in that situation is you should have been like, yeah, I'm an undercover policeman. I need to know if you've ever done drugs. And he'll be like, yeah, no, I have one day. You're like, come with me, you just need to do a urine sample. And if I say you're positive, you have to pay me $1,000.
I've heard that you've been buying urine that contains drugs, which is technically buying drugs. So you're under arrest.
I should have tried it, like citizens arrest them. Anyway, this bloody country. Anyway, yeah. So it made me slightly paranoid about drugs in general. Like, so when people around me. Like,
wait. It made you paranoid about drugs and not about your police force in the country.
Yeah, for example, so some other friends were saying they want to take ecstasy. And I was like, okay, yeah, we'll go to nightclub. We'll take some ecstasy. It'll be like one of my favorite drugs. Let's do it. It's like, no, we can't do it in the clubs. So you're crazy. I'm like, where else would you be taking ecstasy if not in the clubs?
What?
Like, no. There's a whole bunch of police there just watching for people doing drugs. I'm like, this makes sense. That actually checks out.
Yeah, but even MDMA, you're saying like I like to take it when I'm dancing, and good for you, right? I think MDMA should be allowed to take clubbing, festivals. I'm definitely for that. But even then, MDMA has powerful therapeutic properties, right? And we're still not using it, maybe because too many people are doing it too randomly at festivals. So I'm not against that.
People do it to get fucked up, right? That's my experience of these drugs. You get drunk. I'm not fucked up enough. I do some coke. Oh no, that's actually sobered me up. What's next? And it's not. I think we should do this. It's like, what can I find now from the black market while fucked up to get more fucked up? That's most people's drugs experience.
I think a lot of people do that, but I think it is beginning to change, no? Like,
this is also applying very blanket explanation to what is a very chaotic industry of drug taking. We don't have, as we talked before, we don't have a tradition. It's anything can happen. In my case, I got ecstasy the first time I was at a festival. Some very nice older woman gave it to me. I trusted her. I wasn't looking to get very fucked up. I trusted the experience. I had a great night. First time I fell in love with techno. No, I fell in love with the techno music rather than with the woman. I'm still much happier with that marriage. But another person might do it indeed because they transgressed and they just want to get fucked up and they're looking for the new thing. And another person has a whole other story again. And so you've got a lot of very different stories, I think. And as Finn said with the research, even if someone dies on ecstasy because they took 10 pills and they got overheated on a dance floor, it's one death compared to how many deaths on alcohol?
Oh yeah, like hundreds of thousands a year.
And again, if
which
that's
we're
what
also
you're trying to
allowing.
prevent, wouldn't it be better if people could come forward and say, "Oh, my friend needs help," right? Not scared to call an ambulance.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes it's actually the people drink too much water. They drink too much water because everyone says, "Oh, if you do it, make sure you drink enough water." And then people drink too much. 5 people give them that advice, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think it's a good point because we need to talk about education, really. I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, our drug education was PC Kingston coming in with a suitcase of drugs, literally, this is what happened, in an assembly of like 200 kids, and then you get little packets. I mean, they probably didn't even have drugs in them, right? Thinking about it now.
Or
This
his
is-
own personal stash.
Or he's just like, see me afterwards if you want to.
Livens the day up, doesn't it?
Anyway, he took each one out and he sort of gave us a brief explanation and then gave us a horror story for each one of the drugs. So he's like, this one is ecstasy, yeah? It comes in pills. Like, if you take one of them, you'll get off your head, you won't know what's happening, you'll sweat so much, and then you'll die of dehydration, which happened to one boy last week, blah, blah, blah. And then this is LSD. It's a liquid or maybe a little paper. You take it, and then you can just see anything. For example, one kid was being chased by giant coat hangers in Marks and Spencer, and then jumped off a roof.
And died,
and just the classic bullshit stories, like that one weird story of someone. But anyway, I think the point that I'm trying to make is we need better education. No? About these
Can
things.
I be the voice of the noob here?
Go on.
That PC's lecture on drugs are bad, isn't helpful. But is it also problematic to tell everyone drugs are great and we should all be doing lots and lots of drugs? Like, where is the limit? Because I think we all know people that have done too much, gone too far. I think the big one for us was at the end of the year after exams. People had wound their minds up and up and up and up and up, done the exams. In that heightened state, drugs, nothing else to worry about, but the mind was still spinning. And I think every year, I'm pretty sure every year someone flipped out, right? Every year we lost someone. So you can go too far. And we can say, if it was legal, that wouldn't fix it actually. Some people are heightening their mental state, right? I've seen people do this with meditation. People who have real problems like trauma. You shouldn't heighten your mental state in the wrong mental state, right?
It's really clear because for me, it's like with PC Kingston's drugs are bad and K, you don't believe him about weed because you try a bit of weed and you're like, hang on a minute, that was actually really fun.
You're full
and
of
then
shit,
you're like,
yeah.
well, all the other fucking stories are bullshit as well. Or I'm just saying, like, be honest. Do you know what I mean? Be honest about what their good and bad effects are, what could happen, what you got to be careful of, and just be careful but make your own mind up. Right, what do you reckon about that? Just a sensible, evidence-based drug advice.
Exactly like you say. I would just be honest. And I would say, kids, the best thing you can do is not drink, not smoke, drink 1 cup of coffee max a day, use as little sugars as you can. Start with the basics, because these are also drugs, right? And I'm not going to tell you what not to do and what to do. Make up your own fucking minds for that, right? You're gonna be an adult. If you do this, expect this. And just expect this. If you want to take ecstasy, do it, and just don't do it more often than once in 3 months. Just be honest, the best strategy in life will probably be not to do many narcotics at all, across the board.
You heard it here first, kids.
The one thing the whole thing about children and drugs. Now, don't give children too many drugs; they just can't handle it, and then they end up owing you money. There are studies and indicating that. I mean, it's fairly well established that certain drugs, including marijuana, can inhibit cognitive growth if introduced too early. I would really like to see drugs treated in the same way that we treat alcohol, and that there's regulation, there is as I say, education. And it's not, I mean, kids will still use it, like 14, 15-year-olds will probably get hold of some pot. By stigmatizing it, by driving it underground, it's not benefiting anyone. Set an age limit on it and have it available to the adults who can make up their own mind.
I mean, that's got to be better than what it is now. If that's the ideal policy, I'm not sure, but let's do research, let's do the scientific research. Let's continue looking for the benefits of all these drugs and look at the dangers, and then have a government policy, a legal policy based on that research. I don't think that's too crazy.
Can I deep dive on the research then? So you've made some claims, and I've heard some very bold claims elsewhere about the potential therapeutical benefits of some of these drugs. But I mean, everything's potentially beneficial, right? Like, what's actually been proven?
Well, we have got very strong indications that ketamine helps with depression. Even in America, they're now using ketamine for depression, which, if in America they're researching it, there's very strong connection. MDMA has been proven to be helpful for post-traumatic stress disorder. It's been fully acceptingly proven. It's just there is not enough cultural clout. I think it's the same as with nuclear energy. We know it helps, but people are just against it. People are just very in their sort of illogical.
No, for good reason. Look, it's easy to dismiss the propaganda, right? Like Nixon's propaganda. Billions were spent pushing this message of drugs and bad. Okay, this is your brain on drugs,
Right.
fried eggs.
Sure.
America went round, bizarrely, right, round Southeast Asia. And one of the things, during the height of the Cold War, one of the things they fought hardest against was the war on drugs, which went international. And America would say, we'll give you billions in aid on the condition that you make the following drugs illegal. And a bunch of Southeast Asian farmers are like, oh, okay, if it matters that much to you, fine. But why? Like, and to this day, even like in Thailand, they're like finally
Right.
legalizing weed, and they're like, America, we have a contract somewhere that says you'll stop buying our rice if we legalize. Is that still the case? Do you, even though you're legalizing it in your country, is that still a blocker for you?
The war on drugs is not the way it was in the 80s.
Well,
anymore,
drugs have won
right?
the war on drugs.
It is changing. But don't underestimate, many countries are still against it, right? Look at Indonesia, the Philippines, but Indonesia as well. But Philippines, Duterte is just letting people slaughter drug criminals and anyone dealing in drugs, because they have an issue there. They have quite an issue there. Russia will never allow legally these substances to exist. Thus, they have a really big issue with black market drugs that are of low quality.
What's this like crocodile?
Homemade stuff. Yeah. Well, they're
Terrible.
homemade.
But again, I don't know whether
stuff,
that's
so-
just the press once again reporting on evil drugs. Like,
Well, what's known in Russia, they do a lot of research chemicals, because research chemicals can be ordered online. And not necessarily that research chemicals are necessarily a bad thing. It's just they're novel substances that we have no knowledge about. They're completely new molecules.
oh, are these like the analogs?
Yeah, the analogs,
So they're
yeah.
not. They haven't been made illegal yet because they're like, oh no, it's not CBD, it's CBC.
The UK government changed their legislation actually to make them all automatically illegal.
Yeah,
Years back.
UK is very smart with that regard. In Holland, they need to ban each novel substance individually. So we have quite a lot of them you can legally buy online at the moment. Yeah.
Good. You got to slow those lawmakers down, right? Distract them with bullshit.
But I mean,
like that.
it's great that you can buy here now 1p LSD. It's basically LSD with a few atoms added to it, and it's supposedly.
That sounds like it's pretty much the same thing.
Just as a sprig of lemon. Oh no, if you put lemon in your LSD, it's fine. What's the difference?
Supposedly the body just removes the 1p group and makes it into LSD. Supposedly, right?
I'm way more dubious of that than something that's been around since the 50s and has been done loads and, has a pretty low mortality.
Oh yeah, you'd rather do something that has a bit of research behind it, for sure. The problem is that proper LSD is much harder to buy nowadays, because the biggest producer of LSD got caught in 2000, and since then the market's crashed. He's getting free now, recently. It was announced he's finally getting
so
free.
Rare? I like Quaaludes, right? So why can so few people manufacture these drugs? It was the same with, what was it, from Wolf of Wall
Well,
Street?
the Quaaludes is very good reason, because these are barbiturates. They're quite a dangerous class. We've gotten better sleeping medication and pain medication since then, so we're not using that old class anymore. Because those were very addictive and gave us a lot of problems. So we made new benzodiazepines, where you can buy like temazepam and stuff like that or get from the doctor. Prescribed. Pharmaceutical companies also just make better inventions, right? This is a thing that happens as well, even though they're evil and they make too much money. There's also a logic behind
Why
it.
is LSD so hard to make?
Well, no, it's doable. I think it's not an easy synthesis, but it's also the ingredients you need to produce it are controlled very, very strictly, and they've just been reducing the market quite a lot. I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true, that the big organizers of the big hippie festivals that you have, the psytrance festivals, Ozora and Boom, that there's LSD producers behind that, and they
allegedly,
and they can produce just so much quantity of LSD and sell it at their own festival that it's for them a less risky investment to produce it.
If I had a vat full of drugs, I would organise a music festival. That would be.
I mean, I think if the government really was concerned with eliminating drugs in our societies, then perhaps they should address the various societal downfalls that causes people to lapse into addiction and drug dependency in the first place. But I don't know, it doesn't sound as cool as fighting drugs.
I don't know. That sounds like a complex
It
problem
is.
to solve top
It
down. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to throw money at it, and where's the money going to
How
come
about
from?
this? How about you decriminalise and legalise drugs, thereby saving the money of enforcing it, having the legal system, and all the people in prison, and then you can use this money to open rehabilitation centres, education centres,
Wait, and then what?
research
Tax
on
it?
all of these issues. Yeah,
What, like put a
Yeah.
tax
A
on the
little bit.
drugs
Yeah.
a little bit.
to then, fund community projects and rehabilitation and healthcare?
Yeah, and when they do drugs,
Yeah.
when they
Wait,
do
wait, wait.
drugs, you
Yeah,
give
yeah,
them the
it-
best stuff that is, the least dangerous version of what you can give to them to, mess with their brains a bit.
And take revenue
No,
and power away from
guys.
criminal
Yeah,
cartels.
No, guys. There's a pretty good counter argument to this though, which is taxes theft. So
Oh yeah,
I guess
yeah,
we can't
good
do
point.
that.
Yeah.
did you guys come up with this idea while on drugs? Sounds a little bit too convenient.
You just have to know about it. You just have to do a basic little bit of investigation and then go, oh yeah, that's obviously the solution.
So are we gonna get there with the new generation? Is the demographics changing that the younger generations are more accepting of it?
I can't believe how many societal problems the solution is the worst generation has to die.
Your dad is gonna love this episode, Chris.
Oh, he's blocked me. He's blocked me.
He
so
doesn't listen
hard.
anymore.
No.
No.
He's blocked me on Facebook. I can't even message him anymore.
Oh man, the boomer wars is quite on with you.
I have to message my mum to message him. To be like, hey, does Dad want
Steal his mobile and subscribe him to Beyond Binary, please.
Oh, he was going. It was. Oh, Chris, the problem is with your politics and bloody Corbyn. And I go, sorry, what's Corbyn done recently, Dad? Like, I haven't. What's he up to this week? Like, oh my God.
Gardening, riding spikes. Though.
Want to carry on, or should we
I
wrap it
think
up?
we
Yeah,
can
I
wrap
think-
it up. We've been over an hour.
This episode brought to you by drugs.
From Bergen, I'm Jimmy.
From somewhere in Spain, it's Mr. Jin.
From the University of Cambridge, I am King Noodle.
I'm recording.
Can you hear me now? Yes, it does.
Excuse me, my crayon is a monkey. I find this conversation
Taking some interest in learning a bit more about technology, philosophy, and I like to.
I'm an educator.
Absolutely.
We're going to stay anonymous.
That's a cop out.
The binary's gone. I thought jingle was like Dutch for cheers.
What music should we put at the end? Yeah, I think we should put one of your tunes, Mr. Jin. I think we should put one of your techno tunes on there, seeing as you mentioned techno.
Thank you.